Hello, YouTube. It is currently Friday, January 6th, and it is 4:15 in the afternoon. I'm currently westbound on US Highway 64 out of Tulsa, Oklahoma. I I picked up a load of poles yesterday in Covenant, Louisiana, which is just a little south of Baton Rouge. I'm taking them up to Peabody, Kansas. It's the steel utility poles, and I haul a lot of these, but this is my first time picking them up down there in Louisiana. It's kind of weird because it's a really long haul for this load going all the way to Kansas, because you can get the same utility poles from a company about 50 miles from my destination, and also the same company has facilities that make these poles up in Omaha, Nebraska area, and down in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. So in fact, like I said, I'm driving through Tulsa, or just got through driving through Tulsa anyway. But I don't know, maybe they needed these are a little bit different than what I normally haul, but so maybe they just had to go with whatever company could get them the best delivery date. They are delivering on Saturday, and that's kind of weird too, because usually, you deliver these poles to these job sites Monday through Friday, like 7 a.m. to 3 p.m., but they're going to take me tomorrow morning. I'm actually going to drive all the way to the job site tonight and sleep there tonight, I think, unless something happens that runs me out of time. But I have 4 of these poles, and they're section. Well, no, I think they're whole poles because they're sealed at the end, and got a total weight of about what was it? Right around 29,000, I think. 27,000. Yeah, so just a little bit under. It was like 27.9 or something like that. But anyway, that's what I'm hauling is those poles, and like I said, there's 4 of them, and they weigh a grand total of 27,000 pounds. So you can guess just how big they are. I have one that is 53. Well, it says 54 feet, but it's actually 53 because it does not overhang my bed at all. And then I have 3 that are 48 footers. So, but anyway, so it's a kind of a long haul. And actually, I spent a lot of time down there in Baton Rouge waiting to get loaded up. It was crazy. It was like over 3 hours just to get loaded at this place. But they were constantly working, except for when they left to go on their lunch break, which I'm not going to hassle people for that. It was just such a long line that it took that many hours to get me through the line. But once they got to me, it was super quick. They actually had me drive to a different part of the yard instead of going to get the poles and bring them to me. They had me drive to a different part of the yard. I'm actually getting ready to cross a lake. I like driving through here. It's really pretty, and I'll tell you what, if I lived down here in the Tulsa area, I definitely, definitely wouldn't mind trying to find a quaint little shack here on this lake. I'm sure a shack is about all I'd be able to afford out here, but anyway, it sure is pretty out here. But anyway, like I said, it took them a while to get me loaded, but I mean, what do? It's not like they were sitting around on their hands, and they take you as you come in, and they just worked on getting worked as quick as they can to get everybody loaded. like I said, I'm not going to hassle them for taking their lunch break. But like I said, they were working, definitely for sure. So anyway, so I want to talk to you guys about a financial crimes case that I investigated, and this is actually a pretty cool case. I've investigated a lot of financial crimes in my career as a cop, and for those of you who are new, I'm a trucker that retired as a police detective after serving 25 years. About half of that was spent as a detective, and the first half was spent me patrolling the mean streets of my city, and I was definitely patrolling the busiest part of the city. We had a lot of narcotics and prostitution, and a lot of gang violence, a lot of homicides, and lots of other shootings and other things going on. It was, so I definitely worked the busier side of town, that's for sure. And then I went on to be a detective, where I investigated a bunch of stuff, and a lot of stuff was actually pretty interesting. And honestly, this is just kind of a way of me telling my story and me telling my stories and just kind of documenting it. I've actually thought about writing a book. Got a buddy of mine that's actually going to write his memoirs, and I think he's doing it mainly for his kids. I don't know if he'll publish it. He probably will try to get it published, I would imagine. But just like me, man, we investigated some pretty hairy stuff, to be honest with you. There's some stuff that we've investigated that would just make your skin crawl. There's some stuff that, to be honest with you, I don't know that I could actually even talk about it on YouTube. I don't know how that works. If it'll get censored, because it's some pretty bad stuff. A lot of it I would just like to forget, but honestly, that's not going to happen. So, but anyway, and I'm not going to talk about anything that's really not got an interesting factor to it. Like I said, this is a financial crime, and typically I didn't like investigating financial crimes that much, because there just really wasn't there just really wasn't a whole lot of coolness to them, I guess. There wasn't there wasn't a whole lot of prestige, I guess. It was usually people cashing stolen and forged checks. People would steal people's mail. They'd erase the checks, or use some kind of cleaner to clear off the checks. They would write the checks back into their name, or one of their aliases, actually, is what usually would happen. And then they would take it to the bank and cash them. And of course, the people who wrote the check wouldn't think anything of it, because most of the time, or usually, these people would cash a check for that amount. So that way, if they wrote a $600 check for rent, then they're not going to, or a $600 check for car payment or whatever, they're not going to miss it, because it's going to come back as being cleared. And they're not going to miss it until whoever they wrote the check to calls them up and says, hey, you owe me this $600. But anyway, so this guy, he actually, I'm going to give you just kind of a quick overview of the case. He actually bought a $30,000 truck. He attempted to buy a $60,000 BMW, and then was successful at buying another $60,000 BMW. The truck and the attempted purchase of a $60,000 BMW was done with the stolen identity of one victim, and then the successful purchase of a different $60,000 BMW from a different city was actually done using the identity of a different victim. But anyway, so it all started out with, I got a call, or a call got transferred to me of a guy that wanted to report that someone used his identity to steal a vehicle. And basically this guy reports, he says, hey, I got this payment book in the mail from the dealership, and and then I called the dealership wanting to know what's up with his payment book because I've never bought a vehicle from them, and that's when he learned that somebody uses identity. From the description and also just kind of everything else that he knew, he gave a good indication as to who the suspect was. The suspect was actually a friend of, I believe, his stepson or some kind of relation, and they had been living in a house that he owned in my city while the victim was living in a different city with his girlfriend or another family member, or his wife. I'm not sure. I don't remember how the whole family dynamics really worked a whole lot. And I'm gonna go ahead and throw a disclaimer that, like, what I testified to and what my reports are 100% accurate, or at least are accurate, and what I am, the story I'm telling is strictly from memory. So there's going to be some things that might be a little bit different, and some things might be a little bit off, but it's going to be pretty close. But that's my disclaimer, just in case somebody ever says, well, in this video one time you said this, because I'll be going to court for the next few years. I've been retired now for about a year and a half, and I actually have court coming up on a case in February. On a case that I investigated, but in any case, and most of the case I talk about will actually have already either been closed or prosecuted, because we get a lot of cases and they'll be closed, or we'll close them without prosecution because we just don't have the evidence to prosecute. So anyway, so this guy gives me the suspect information, and I have the truck information, and I end up issuing an attempt to locate for the truck. Basically, I put out a be on the lookout or a BOLO for this truck. Well, a couple of days later, a street officer is driving by a gas station, and he sees this truck that matches my BOLO, but he doesn't remember exactly what the BOLO was for. He just remembers that I was looking for a truck that looked like this, and he didn't know why. And I had investigated a lot of violent stuff too, so to be honest with you, he could have been thinking that, it would definitely be smart of him to look up why I want this truck, because I could be looking for a violent felon just as easily as I could be looking for a non-violent identity thief. But anyway, so as he's kind of trying to figure things out, the guy gets in the truck from the gas station and sees the police officer. He just takes off. Automatic, starts running from the cops. The officer really doesn't chase because he doesn't know why I'm looking for it. He can't remember why, and he wants to make sure he's right on everything, and he basically lets this guy go. Well, the guy ends up crashing the car a few blocks later into some trees. He ran off the road into a really thick wooded area that had small trees, and actually damaged up the truck pretty badly. I mean, it was a pretty nice truck, but man, it was all scratched up and dented and everything, and the tow truck had to come in and pull it back out of the trees. And but anyway, so then I learned that the suspect had actually been in the Quick Shop. It was a convenience store that we have, and he was attempting to use a stolen check that he had tried to pass off as his to pay for his goods. Well, the clerk, was giving him a hard time, rightfully so, about the check. I want to say the clerk maybe had recognized the guy from before and knew that he had used a check before and knew that those two checks had different names on them. And I think that's what it was. And this guy, he's super easy to remember. And he had these really dark eyes. I mean, like almost black. And his eyes had a glint to them, or they looked like they had a glint to them, almost like the flashback you would see in photography. If you take a picture of a window or something, it looked like. I mean, if you're looking at him in real life or in his photos, it looks like there's a flash that has gone off in his eyes, and it's like a sliver in each eye. And like I said, his eyes are just damn near black with this glint. So she was able to recognize him as, hey, you're in here, the night before cashing this check that had, a different person's name on it. I'm not going to accept this check from you. So he ended up bolting because he saw the cops. And that's what it was. He saw the cop outside, bolted out to the truck and took off. So I have an attempt to locate out to arrest this guy, and I end up learning that he actually tried using the same guys. And let me rewind a little bit. I go to the dealership where he got the car from, and it just so happens the dealership had a former owner of a jewelry store that I had investigated working in there. This guy had done some prison time for basically just being a crooked ass jewelry store owner. I talked about him in one of my previous videos, which was another pretty cool case that I investigated. And I actually, anyway, yeah, you can just watch that one. So while I'm in the dealership, like I said, I had recognized the guy, didn't say anything about it. It was just kind of one of those things. I'm very professional when it comes to being on duty, and our dealing was done and over with, so I wasn't going to mess with him. I wasn't going to make any comments to him. He wasn't involved in this case either. He just happened to be working there. But anyway, let me rewind a little bit more. When I caught the case, I spoke with an investigator for the bank, or the credit union actually, that told me he suspects that the dealership might have forged the suspect's name on a document. He went on to explain to me that basically, they go through the approval process, and they approve this guy's name to the victim in the case. They approve his name for a loan on a car. Well, they do all the paperwork at the dealership. He drives away in the car, and then they ship the paperwork or fax the paperwork or however it works over to the bank the next day or whatever. And the bank says, hey, you need to have this. You missed one signature on this document, and it needs to be signed, or else we can't approve the loan. So, and I want to say a little bit of time had passed, and the bank basically held the dealership's feet to the fire and said, hey, if you don't get this signature, we are going to cancel the loan, which then would make the dealership responsible for the car. Well, the thought was that somebody from the dealership forged this guy's name. So, because if this guy just illegally bought a car, do you think he's really going to come back to correct some paperwork? Yeah, no, he's not going to come back. He wouldn't come back to save his life, because he's going in the car. He succeeded in what he wants to do. He doesn't give two shits whether or not the paperwork is filled out correctly. So he's not going to come back. So, because basically the dealership was trying to tell the bank or the credit union, hey, you authorized the loan, so this debt is on you. And then they were like, no, this should fall back to you because you guys sold this car to somebody that bought it fraudulently. Well, when I was talking to the sales manager, I brought this up. I said, well, I got a question about the guy's signature on the loan. I said, I understand there were some issues about getting a signature. And he goes, oh, yeah. He came back in a couple of days later and signed that so we could ship it off. I said, really? He said, you had his contact information, and just called him, and after he fraudulently bought this car, he came back in and signed this name and made the paperwork right. And he said, well, yeah, that's pretty much it. So then I told him, I said, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, I don't know, don't remember exactly what our conversation was like, but that was basically it. So then I tell him, I say, well, I think when I arrest this guy, I'm going to have to go through some handwriting samples to make the determination, because I'm not sure whether I believe that this guy who fraudulently bought a car is going to come back and make right on the paperwork. And I said, that's just a hard pill to swallow. At that point, the sales manager says, you know what, hey, and not, he wasn't angry, he wasn't, like, fine, we'll take care of it, he was just like, hey, you know what, don't worry about it, we'll just go ahead and eat that money. We're not gonna make the bank, we'll just make the claim with our insurance company, and we'll just be done with it. So that part of the investigation obviously got kind of shut down, because if they would have continued to say, yeah, he came back and filled out this paperwork, then there would have been another financial crimes investigation of the sales manager, that was trying to tell me that the paperwork was above board. And another thing about that sales manager, he told me when he realized that they had sold this guy a truck under somebody else's name, he literally, this guy was, I think he's a jerk for saying this, but the sales manager says, man, we should have sold him the $50,000 car. That's just crazy. I don't understand why people would think that. And that's just another reason why I think, yeah, they did some crooked ass shit and forged the victim's name so that way the loan wouldn't come back on them. But anyway, or the loss, I guess, not the loan, because they get the truck back and all that, but now they got to fix everything. So anyway, so during my investigation, I find out that while this guy is on the run, he attempted to buy a $60,000 BMW from a BMW dealership in town. And I called them up, and they said, yeah, he came in, said his name was this guy, and there were some issues with his credit being frozen, and he was actually on the phone with the bank telling them that they need to unlock his credit. And I think he even called the credit bureaus saying that they need to authorize this loan, because basically when this guy realized he was a victim of identity theft, he made it to where there has to be some pretty intensive authentication to make sure that he is the one actually buying a vehicle or buying something with credit. And so he's actually arguing, saying, hey, I need to buy this vehicle, I'm here at the dealership now. Well, the dealership finally told him, you know what, you go take care of your credit issues and then you can come back later. And sure enough, he ain't gonna come back. So during that time, I found that he got arrested, and I ultimately booked him in the jail. And part of what I get to do when I arrest somebody is I get access to their phone calls. So and I can also have access to their mail. Basically, they would make copies of letters for me in investigations. But trust me, I got so much crap going on that I'm not just listening to people's phone calls or reading their mail for entertainment value, because there's just too much crap going on. But basically, I can log into a computer and punch in their name and their phone, and I get a list of all their phone calls, and I can listen to them. In order to do this, I had to receive training and sign a privacy thing, and basically something that says I'm not going to log in just to listen to random prisoners' phone calls. And also, if they are talking to an attorney, I have to hang up immediately. As soon as I recognize that they are talking to an attorney, I have to hang up. And that's happened to me before. I try to be as professional as I can and by the rules, and I don't, I basically I don't try to skirt the rules. The rules are the rules, and I got to follow them. But anyway, so I'm listening to this guy's phone calls, and he's talking to his dad. And basically, I'm listening to the phone calls to try and gather further information to provide evidence for my case. Maybe he's going to talk about the situation, things like that. So he's talking to his dad on the phone, and his dad says, "Son," he says, "I want to call the dealership and have them come and get this car." So then I'm like, "Say what?" So he got the truck. He tried buying another car, and this guy had a drug problem, and basically he's doing all this stuff. He's forging checks because he has no money, and it's kind of weird. I think he was on drugs. I think I talked to his attorney about him being on drugs and all that. His dad had a very successful business, and at one point his son actually worked for him and made a very good salary, but had got hooked on drugs and kind of like blew all that away. So anyway, so dad is telling him, he's like, "Son, I'm gonna call the dealership, just have him come back, take the car back." Well, the son, the victim, or the suspect, gets all defensive. Dad, don't do that, man. I legally bought that car. I promise you, man, I legally bought that car. I'm going to get out of jail. I'm going to get out of jail soon. I will take care of that. Don't move the car. So after listening to that phone call, I tracked down Dad and told him, I said, told him what I listened to, and he says, he says, some police officers actually already came and took that car. So what? He says, well, apparently he bought it, from another city, and he had been parking it in our garage, and I guess he bought it using identity theft. So I ended up contacting that dealership in the other city, and sure enough, he used somebody else's name to buy the car. Basically, what I kind of put together was he had stolen this guy's mail and used documents that was in this guy's mail to make himself a fake ID card with this guy's name. And what people would do is, in my state, when you go get an ID card or a new license, you're issued basically what looks like a receipt from Walmart, except it's got your picture on it and your driver's license information on it, and it's just a piece of paper with a black and white picture on it. And they give that to you, and that is your driver's license or ID until your hard copy comes to you in the mail. And apparently those are really easy to make, because I've ran into cases before where people were making these, and so he had made one, or had one made, and was using that as his ID to buy the car. And at one point, I even asked the first car dealership, I said, really, some guy's going to come in here with one of these IDs, and you're going to authorize them buying a car with this ID? And that is when I learned that's actually very common. Like, people will get a new driver's license and then they want to go get a new car. I had no idea. I was like, if I would have been a car salesman and never been told this, if somebody came to me with one of those IDs, I'd ask them, well, where's your real ID? Okay, well, show me your old ID. I wouldn't accept that paper as identification for anything. I mean, that's how common this crap was. But apparently it's just as common for, that it be legit. Ultimately, I think the guy actually ended up pleading to the cases. I tried getting the other city to put together another case on them. Basically, I got blown off. I mean, it is what it is. Now I know how some people feel when they try to report something to the cops and they get blown off. Because what it is, whatever they're trying to report is definitely important to them. But the cops are like, man, it's just some financial crime shit. And that's basically what I got. And I mean, when I got off the phone with the detectives, yeah, they basically, with the detectives in that other city, I knew that no, they're not going to file a case on this guy. They're just not going to. And if they did, then that starts building up criminal history, and people can be sentenced to a lot more prison time. When they start getting their criminal history built up. But it is what it is. So, but anyway, so that's kind of my story. And like I said, that the reason why that one was so interesting is because my normal financial crimes investigation usually involved somebody erasing the pay to the order line and writing their own name in, or their alias, or their friend's name, and paying their friend $20 to go cash this $300 check, or people stealing checks. Something else actually that was actually real popular. I'm gonna end with this, I think. So you can buy check stock at like office supply stores. Like you can go buy a whole book or a whole sheet of checks. They're just completely blank checks, and you can print all the information on the front of them, like routing numbers, account numbers, and names and stuff like that. Because we had had people trying to do that with businesses and trying to cash payroll checks that way. But what I found out when I had one of these checks as suspicious, if I got called out to a case and somebody says, hey, I don't know about this check, I just Google the routing number. You don't even have to, you literally just put the numbers on the bottom of the check into the search engine, into Google or whatever, and it will come up as to what bank owns that routing number. And if it doesn't match the bank on the check, then it's 100% fake. This is something I actually would teach banks that, hey, if you get a check that you think is fishy, just do that. Just Google the routing number, and it will tell you what bank it's supposed to be. Because most of the time, they're not going to have the matching bank with a routing number. They're just going to know, or they're just going to look at some other check and copy that routing number, but then put, another bank's name on the check. So it's a really quick, easy way to check a suspicious check. But anyway, so that's my story for today. Anyway, if you like what you hear, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. I haven't put out much content lately, over the past couple of months, but I'm gonna try to get back into it and see what we can do. Because like I said, I think I've got some pretty interesting stuff. So, pretty interesting story. But anyway, you guys have a good day, and until next time.